So from my personal experience, I know the power of actually spending time in nature, and it results in inevitable recharge. I feel really also reset. And from experience, I know that nature really has healing powers. I'm not sure I fully understand why that is. I just feel really good in nature. I hope, Sarah, you can shed some light maybe about this process.
Sure.
And actually get to learn about this. I'm very excited to be talking today to someone who knows a lot more about healing in nature, also who has healed herself in a big regard, I think, in nature. So I'm talking to Sara Schulting Kranz. I hope I pronounced your last name.
Perfect.
About healing in nature. And actually, after having dealt with a good share of trauma herself, Sara learned through her own experience how nature has helped her to heal, cultivate compassion, and actually practice forgiveness. I think all very valuable traits that we can have as a human being, and also to strive towards, or to move towards, better saying, towards happiness, and also to be able to share that happiness. Sarah, you have, because of your experience, wrote a book titled Walk Through This. Also, the walking part, I think, is very important.
Yeah.
We'll touch upon that. Harnessing the healing power of nature and travel the road to forgiveness. And you started a company offering nature retreats in amazing locations, really vast, expansive locations such as Grand Canyon in Alaska. And I think those are really amazing experience. I'm 100% sure of it. Not only for the people that take part, but also for you to lead that, I imagine.
Oh, so good.
Yeah. So you're winning every time. Yeah.
Oh,
Sarah, thanks
I'm going on Saturday. I'm sorry. I leave again on Saturday, and so yeah, I get super excited. It's really fun.
Can imagine. Yeah. So thanks a lot for making time and talking to me today. I really appreciate it. Before we go into the topic of healing in nature, if it's okay for you, I'd like to ask you to share in a nutshell, if that's even possible, your story that kind of got you on the path of what you're doing right now. And I know this is a very personal question, but I also know from reading your book, I think that it gives things some body for people to understand where you came from. So if you don't mind to share a little bit about it, I think it was very powerful. And I'd love for you to share that a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I've often said that the best teachers, the best guides, the best coaches are those who have experienced it and lived it and know how to actually implement and put into effect the things that help to guide us in our life. And so I was always a teacher. I went to college, I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison and UW-Madison, and I majored in art teaching, which is why my life has taken a creative kind of spin as well into the business that I do today. So my traumas started back when I was 17. I've experienced everything from sexual assault. I was raped when I was 17.
Yeah.
And I talk pretty openly about the experience of having to walk through a trauma at 17 that should never have happened, obviously. And then having to go through it and have so many people not believe me, not want to be there for me. Right. And so what happened was
you for it because their frame of reference was different.
Yeah, exactly. And things were really different back then. I'm 48 now. That happened when I was 17. It was a long time ago. What it gave me, though, was the basis and the foundation, because at that age, at such a young age, at 17, I tried to press charges and they wouldn't do anything about it. And this is all in the book. And we're going to go very because my story is really deep and I want to get to the part that helps people so much, right? So read about it in the book more than anything. I'm really open about it there. But the thing that happened was that there were so many people that were not there. My family was there. They were amazing. What I learned back then was that the first person that needs to believe in you is you. That was the number one most important thing that I learned. And I also took that time when I was 17 and used a lot of my outdoor space, not even realizing it, that's what I was doing, to heal. Right. And so what happened was I would, to get out of my head or to like stop the story or to stop what was happening, I would go and plop my butt down in a cornfield and I would start drawing. And all of that became the basis of what I then used in my future trauma that happened at 40. And it also became what ended up being my major in college, which was in art education. And so when I was 40 years old, I ended up finding out that I experienced my second trauma when I found out my husband had been betraying me for 14 of the 17 years of my marriage, and it was with men. And so I ended up, it was a really devastating time in my life, because I ended up finding that there was just so much happening, right? There was so much going on at that point in my life. And I needed to get back to what I knew, which was how to heal, which I was learned. That's what I learned when I was 17, was how to go back to who believes in you, which is you.
Yeah.
My mom, it's interesting because where the title of the book came from was actually my mother, which is really interesting. So we're working on a documentary right now, and the documentary is called Walk Through This, a story of starting over. And that also then brought into the book title. And my mom was the one who used to walk me down the street at the age of 17. And she'd say, not everybody is going to believe you. And yet we need to continue to take your steps forward, walk through this, right? Like walk through your trauma and just hold your head high and know that at some point people will actually believe. Those that choose to. There will always be people that choose not to. That's their choice. But that doesn't, what really comes back to it is, who are you as a human being? And believing in your own self and believing your truth and knowing your truth. And so I've lived through a lot of stuff, and that became, thankfully, the premise of who I am today. I'm really blessed and honored to be able to do the work that I am doing with people walking through their own journeys of transformation, and really being able to be there for them. It's really cool. Nature became my space.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I really like the story, and also but we'll get to that other question about that with the whales and the dolphins you shared on the pedalboard.
Yeah.
And another thing that you wrote in the book, which really resonated with me, and I think it's a very empowering thought, is that life is happening for you and it's not happening against you. And I really like that. And
yes.
Also what your mother said is that you have to keep moving and you have to move forward. By that, you also move yourself through the experience, and you can overcome it, and it doesn't define you.
Right. And, it's interesting. I do a lot of podcasts and a lot of things, and, speaking about my story, and somebody asked me yesterday, does your story, how do you get sick of like saying it? Do you get sick of talking about it? Yeah. And what I have found is that in my interviews, I'm now to the point of like, go read the book. Here's the basis of it. But really what I want people to understand is that things happen to all of us.
Yes.
Right? Like we all have traumas. We all have experiences. We all have things that we have to walk through. What I really want people to understand and to really, if anything, garner from my story is that it's not, you don't stay there. It's interesting. Everybody walks through the darkness of their life at some point. What we don't want to do is actually stay in the darkness, though. We want to be able to understand and have hope and be able to look forward and see the light that we are all walking towards. Yeah. And so I think that's that space of it's happening for us. And so it's an opportunity for us to grow and learn through that as humans, which is really beautiful to become. I always call it you're unbecoming to become, right? Like this person that you were meant to be in the first place. Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And also the motion of the movement and the walking. I mean, you do this also in your retreats. Why is this walking so important?
Well, so I run
walking. I mean, like,
Yeah, like physically walking. Well, here's the thing. Nature. Do you mind if I like dive into this whole? You're going to get me going here now. I'm like super jammed about nature stuff. Obviously, we spend so much time in our story and in our heads.
Yes.
We are a mindset society. It's just how it is. Yeah. We've gone through so much time, even in personal development, where it was like strengthen the brain.
Yes.
And the thing is that, we can't, there are certain things in life that we cannot mindset. we cannot mindset healing. You cannot mindset forgiveness. You just can't, because it's an experiential journey into self. And so when I'm guiding people on retreats, for example, in the Grand Canyon or in Alaska, we do grounding, nature work, grounding work in the Grand Canyon. And then up in Alaska, we do water healing. So we do a lot of kayaking next to glaciers, and it's more cleansing. The two of them are very different when I'm working with people. That said, the premise of it is the same. Get out of your flipping head and drop into your heart, drop into your body, because trauma actually is stored. Different difficult experiences are stored in our cells. And if we're going to stay in our head, I call it equivalent to staying indoors, right? Like if we're only going to stay inside and do the talk therapy, or if we're only, talk therapy is amazing. Don't get me wrong. I love talk therapy. That said, if we're not going to move at the same time and allow ourselves to really align mind, heart, body, soul, you're going to actually stay in the mindset space. And so walking, moving, doing the movement and getting out of our head and dropping into our heart is so important for the healing process. And what it does is that it takes us back home to our intuition. And our intuition is like our true north. That is our guiding light. And so how many times have we actually had our intuition speak to us, but we didn't listen to it, right? I mean, I know for myself, many a times. And so when we can go back to that alignment of what is our true north in life, where do I really, truly want to be guided to? That's where we have our purpose. That's where we have our passion. That's where we get out of the story that's been, handed to us, right? And we realize we can use this for ourselves in order to become this person that I truly do want to become in my lifetime. Yeah. It's a very cool way of being.
Yeah, I very much resonate with what you're saying, and also very much agree. Following on what you said, Sarah, would you say that this trauma that is stored in the body, is it stored as tension and tightness, and that once we get into the nature, or once we get into, like you talk about kayaking near these glaciers, I have experience, for instance, sitting at the corner of a river where the water sweeps by. I mean, these are these really highly charged, energetically, I don't know, the cleansing places. The current kind of takes everything. Right. And yeah, so this being in nature and also moving in a rhythmic way, which is what you do while walking, right. I think it's a way of releasing this tension. Is that also your experience?
Absolutely. Well, so I always, when I'm working with clients, I tell them, feel into your body. What is your body speaking to you? Yeah. Right. So we're always handed messages. Our body is simply a vessel. We have a heart, soul. We have if you really think about the body in and of itself, it's pretty fascinating, right? And so it's literally just a vessel. And so, when people are experiencing certain emotions, I ask them, where are you experiencing this in your body, and what is the effect of it? How is your body actually speaking to you when you are feeling this? Or when you're thinking this, how are you feeling it, and where is that in your body? Right. And so when we're out in nature, though, what it does is it does calm us, right? And it affects people differently. Like when I'm working with clients, I will have certain clients that are afraid of heights, and they're standing on the edge, and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm afraid. And, they're going into almost like a fight or flight space. Yes. And then there's other people where, they're like, I love standing on the edge. I get like jazzed off that. I personally love standing on an edge. I love it. I stand there and I look over, and I'm like, for me, it's the vastness below that allows me to escape my head. And I just go in wonder and awe. And so it affects everybody a little differently, which is why I always say nature affects people in a different kind of way as well. Yeah. But the beautiful thing that it does, though, is that it truly does get us out of our space, the story, and allows us to actually experience and feel differently. And so it moves the energy through us in a way that we're not staying in that space of high anxiety, which what are we all in right now? Holy moly, the last 2 years, high anxiety, depression, worry, fear, all of it. Right. And so during the pandemic, I took my kids, the beach was closed, and I was like, all right, it's 10 o'clock at night. We're going to go see the bioluminescence. And though we're not really supposed to go to the beach, we're okay, don't tell anybody, but we're going to go down to the beach. Like we're going to join some of those other people that are locals and go down to the beach and watch the bioluminescence. Or even at 10 o'clock at night, I would take them down into the harbor and I'd say, let's jump out of the paddle boards and let's just go around and enjoy what's out here, because it's so easy for us to get stuck in the frickin' fear. It's so easy to get stuck in the anxiety and all of the things that hold us literally in a state of fight or flight. Or fear, like all of it, right? Like fight, flight, or freeze. Like it's so easy to stay there.
And it's interesting because you mentioned the story, right? The story that we keep repeating in our heads. And a lot of that is also fear induced by some cases, the fear of other people. And we just kind of start repeating it. And if you're only in your head, it's very difficult to get out of that rut. But indeed, as you say, when you're in nature, and that's what I personally, I've done quite a bit of coaching myself in the past also. And what I always did with clients was really to look at these vast spaces, like open spaces, and go into the mountains, and because that's a place where you become just such a tiny individual, and all this head stuff doesn't really matter.
No, and isn't that interesting though? It's so when we are in that space of trauma, which we are all triggered at different times in our life, right? Especially for those that have experienced relational and betrayal trauma, anything like that. And this is all of you listeners listen to this, because I'm pretty sure we've all experienced this at some point in our life, where we start to try to attach stories from our past to actually make sense of our presence, of our present. So when we've experienced fear or anxiety or different things, or when we're in it at the moment, we go back to our past, right? To actually make sense of where we're at right now. But the problem is that for so many of us, our past doesn't even make sense. And so I know for my own self, when I was going through my trauma recovery, I was trying to make sense of what my present state was. And I was grabbing stories from my past. And this is a very scientific way. We don't have time to go into all of it. Bessel van der Kolk talks a lot about it in his book, The Body Keeps a Score. But that's what we do. We go to our past to try and actually make sense of our present moment. But the thing that's really interesting, this is where it gets super, super cool. Like this is super, super freaking cool, is that what we want to do is we want to make new alive moments, new alive experiences in our present state, right? In order to make us to feel present and grounded in the moment with our experience of living at this time, right? And so the thing that's really interesting is that Richard Louv talks about, where do we feel most alive? We don't feel most alive in our home. We don't feel most alive sitting behind a screen or watching TV. We feel most alive as human beings outside. That's where we're actually meant to be. And so if we can take it, or if we can take our present moment and go outside and experience awe and wonder, we're in the littlest of things. I'm not saying you got to go climb mountains. I'm like, go watch the clouds like you did when you were a child. Watch them take shape. Watch the waves come up onto the beach and, pull the sand back out into the ocean. Just allow yourself to be present when you're watching or feeling the breeze or the sun on your skin. And so those moments of awe and wonder make us feel most alive in the present, which is then what allows us to step out of our story from the past, which is so freaking cool.
Yeah, it's very true. Nature, you cannot be in nature and not become present. That's it's very hard to do, I would say. And especially.
Yeah, I've seen people do it though. Let me tell you, I've seen people do it. I've seen people where they're like, they're mind setting it. Like, I'm going to go climb that mountain and I'm going to get it done within, 3 hours. And in fact, I had a friend say this to me while I was writing my book. He said, Sarah, I had no idea that this whole time I was missing out on one really important component in climbing those mountains. And I said, what was that? And he goes, slowing down. Because what I was constantly doing was racing to the top to see how fast I could get there, and then racing down to the bottom to jump into my car to get home. And he said, what I missed out on was the beauty along the way. Why you were there. He's like, I was constantly looking down because I was in such a rush to get to the top and a rush to get back down. And he missed out on all of the beauty around him. Very, very metaphorical of life.
Yeah. To process your trauma, Sarah, intuitively, you were drawn to the ocean at the start.
Yeah.
And you were taking time and solitude on the pedalboard, and you were really going far out of the coast. And there you connected with dolphins and whales. I mean, these are very amazing creatures to begin with. It's beautiful. Could you share a little bit more about those encounters and how this helped you in your process? Because you kept on going back there, right?
Oh yeah. Are you kidding? I was like, I named sea lions. Like I had all sorts of fun stuff going on out there. And I still do. I still go out there, obviously. Like that's my space to really decompress now.
Yeah.
I grabbed my paddleboard just instinctively. It wasn't something where I was like, oh, I didn't honestly know what was even happening in my body when I was going through this recovery. Because understand, I was in like tremendous PTSD.
Yeah.
And I had moments where I was like, if I just crash my car up against the 405, all this will go away. Yeah. But the thing that kept me moving forward was that 17-year-old girl within me that had already walked through something that was really hard at such a young age, and just knowing that I could still, do that as a very traumatized woman at 40. And plus I have 3 children and I needed to be there for them. And let's not forget, like, at that time, I was still in this relationship with my now ex-husband, and I wanted him to be okay. Yeah. And so I was also going through that space where I just wanted to really make sure that like our family was intact. And so, and he's a good man, like he really is a good man. So I just want to like throw that out to everybody too. This is his journey. I've got my journey, and we've got the journey that we are all on. And so what I would do is I would take my paddleboard and go onto the Pacific Ocean, and I would just start paddling, and I would paddle and I would paddle and I would paddle. And I didn't have headphones in back then. Now I listen to music and podcasts sometimes. And I just I became one with the water. And again, I didn't realize what was going on at that time. I just knew that it was working, and it felt good. And so because it felt good, I just kept doing it. Yeah. And I would just go out there, 4 or 5 miles offshore. I would do 10 miles a day, and I would just find dolphins, and like dolphins would come out of nowhere and they would paddle next to me. Sometimes I was with friends, sometimes I was alone. And whales, the whales would just come out of nowhere. And what was interesting was that I would start to research also, like, what was the meaning behind the whales? What was the meaning behind the dolphins? Because nature has a lot of meaning, right? Like you look back at Native American culture and they used it within their daily life. And so I would start to just sit with them, and I would watch these whales, right? Like I would literally just sit with them and watch the whales and look into the eye of the whale. Have you ever looked into the eye of a whale? Have you ever had the opportunity?
No.
Freaking most amazing thing ever. Like it is so freaking cool. I had that happen one time where, well, I've had many experiences with whales, but one time I was sitting there and this whale literally flipped, and I just looked into the eye and had a conversation with the whale. Like, wow, it was just me and this whale. Nobody else was out there. My friends had all gone in, and I'm like, dang, like, look at how life is. Like, look at how amazing it is when we slow down and we allow ourselves to simply be present with what's around us, whatever that is, right? And so I was connecting with the universe, with nature, with something so much greater than myself. So much more amazing than anything that like literally living through what I was living through at that time. I didn't even care that I was living through that, because I was experiencing so much awe and wonder in that one moment that I got back down to, what is the meaning of life? Yeah. What is the meaning of life? Like, what is the meaning of even being here? It's not to sit in all of the crap, right? It's actually to move through it and to really feel alive with the presence of the universe and why we're even here in the first place. Yeah. So, I mean, it was really cool. I mean, I just had, and I still do, like I said, like I still have amazing experiences with dolphins and whales.
Is there an element of humility, it's just a humbling experience to see such a huge creature and to connect with it like you did,
Yeah.
like far out on in the ocean. And I think you feel very small. I would probably feel very small. And I think once we become small, also those problems that are very big in our head and those traumas, they also kind of dissolve, I imagine.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. And you know, I also we tend to sit in a lot of ego when it comes to our problems.
Yes.
We sit in the anger, and this is actually where the forgiveness started to come in, because we sit in the anger and we hold on to the anger because we think that if we hold on to the anger, it's actually going to, why release the anger? Because if I release the anger, then I can't be mad at that person that hurt me. But in reality, if you're holding on to the anger, it's actually toxic for you.
Yes.
And so when you're in that moment, that most beautiful moment of happiness and joy, and you're not sitting in the ego of the anger, because it's not, none of it's even about them, right? It's all about like, what's important for me. And so you can start to release that feeling of sadness and the toxicity of the anger and the resentment and all of that, and experience what's really important, which is literally like happiness and joy. Yeah. How can you not experience happiness and joy when you're sitting there with the most magnificent creatures on earth? Yeah. Like truly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I read that in your book, it was really like I got goosebumps just being carried in my imagination to that experience. And I've had an experience in Malaysia once where I swam with, I had snorkels on, and we had this little private boat that we rented, me and my then girlfriend, and this one guy operating the boat. And I was like just with my flippers snorkeling about, and then all of a sudden I met this very big, not whale, sorry, very big turtle. And his head was like massive. It's like maybe 100-year-old turtle or whatever. And I started to just, I could swim with him.
Yeah.
Imagining it was a him, I don't know. But, and just in the back, this guy on his boat, he was very slowly in the back. So I could just keep swimming. And the turtle was swimming, and sometimes his big head came out of the water and he looked at me. It was amazing. Just, yeah.
So, you know what I sometimes think about and what I feel into when I'm in moments like that, and I've done this, you know, with all sorts of different creatures. Like I'll just sit there and watch a bird fly overhead and I'll think, how many people has that bird flown over?
Yeah.
And how many people has that bird flown over, and what was experiencing in those humans' lives when that bird was flying over that human? Yeah. Like how many people were sitting there grieving at the water's edge, and that bird flew over, and that person looked up at the bird and just went, wow, that's flight. Or how many people were falling in love or getting engaged, and that bird flew over and saw that happen at that moment. Yeah. And so when you can start to, like, you know, every moment is a story, and how many creatures have been a part of each and every one of our stories at that time, and how intricately, like really connected that we all are on this life, on this planet. It's pretty fascinating. It's really quite fascinating. Like how many people has that turtle actually swam by
and encountered,
and children and encountered, like little children and you know, adults and people that were older, and what's going through that turtle's mind at that time, right? Like what is that turtle actually sitting with? Like, why is this human in my space? It's just like the littlest of things.
And also the thing is that it was swimming so gracefully, you know, and so calm, and so you just have to slow down while being next to such a creature. It's quite amazing.
You just said something that's really, it's because you're being with it.
Yes.
That's the difference, right? That's the difference between doing in our head and what we're taught to do, and allowing yourself to be with what's around us.
And I think, and this is just a thought that comes up, and thinking back of the experience, it was a very good experience because I had the guy in the boat behind me, a little bit, like a few hundred meters behind me. So I knew he was just tracing me. So I didn't have anything to worry about being unsafe, swimming into the ocean too far or whatever. Like there was always somebody close, so I could really focus on being there. And I imagine that's also what happens when you do these retreats. There is someone, in this case you, who's kind of leading the way and is kind of making sense of the experience and it gives people, they can just fully give in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do a lot of work with it. So when I'm running my retreats, I do a lot of work pre and post retreat. So we do a lot of calls pre-retreat.
Yeah.
It's a 3-month journey. It's a 3-month journey into self. And so we do a month and a half of calls pre and a month and a half of calls post. And the interesting thing about it, I just wrote a text. I just sent a text to one of my clients who were going down into the Grand Canyon over Easter. So Easter morning, we're going to be watching the sunrise inside of the canyon. And I sent her a text last night and I just asked, like, how are you doing? And she goes, I'm okay. Like, I'm okay. And then she kind of like went through her thing. And I thought, oh, okay, somebody's feeling a little anxious. I can feel it through the text.
Yeah.
And so I sent her a message back and I said, I said, I'm grateful. I said, I'm very grateful that you're trusting me and that you're trusting this process of being here. Because I think one of the greatest things that we have to learn to do is for most of us is, first of all, regain trust within self and learning how to trust others again. Yeah. But really the other thing is to surrender, to literally surrender to what's happening for us in this lifetime and believing and having faith, right? And then also staying open to receive, because so many of us forget we're such givers that we forget how to receive. Yeah. And so in this process, when I'm working with people, it's literally going back to that space of trusting me, trusting the process, staying open to what's happening, having intention for it, but releasing the expectations of, what's going to happen, because so many of us didn't fear of expectations, or we sit in expectations thinking that fearful of what's going to happen. That's my point. And so being able to just giving people the space to surrender into it and to just allow themselves to receive. Yes. Right. Like the gift of receiving.
It's super important, because then we can actually become present, because otherwise we're in our head in the future, worried about what might happen. And that just takes away from the experience. Like your friend you talked about, who was just focused on climbing to the top and coming down as possible. He was always in the future, never in the present.
Right. Absolutely. Can I share a story with you that I think you're going to like? How I got to this space because people ask me this all the time. How do you get there? Like, how is it that you're like, how do you get there? Like, their quote, which is really funny. How do you get to that place of being so present? It's almost like an enlightenment, right? I was on the Pacific Ocean once and I paddled. I was like that guy, like that we were talking about, this friend of mine who was just wanting to get somewhere. And I was in a mission at that point to get 4 miles offshore. I just wanted to get to this one part. And so I just paddled, and my head was down. And I got 4 miles offshore. My watch went off. I was 4 miles offshore. And all of a sudden I looked up and this huge fog bank was coming at me. Hadn't even noticed it. And I looked up and I'm like, oh shit, literally shit. Like there's a huge fog bank. And when you're in the fog bank here, you can't see anything. Yeah. And I stood there and I was like, okay, what do I do? And so I thought, okay, first of all, you're not going to freak out. You're going to learn from this. This is happening for a reason. You're not going to freak out, because freaking out does no one any good. And I've learned through this process of using nature to heal that nature always gives us what we need. And so I knew at that moment, I'm like, okay, this is happening for a reason. And what am I going to learn from this? And so I thought, okay, I'm going to be like Pocahontas, if you've watched the movie, and I'm going to flip my board around and I'm literally going to use the ocean as my guide. And I'm going to use my own intuition to get me back to where I need to go. And so this is the allowing yourself to surrender into this space, right? And believing and trusting and receiving. And so I flipped my board. I noticed where the wind was coming from, how I got out there, where the waves and the swells and everything, the direction of the current. And I just started paddling in, and I was like, trust, faith, surrender, open, trust, faith, surrender, open, just, where you're going. And then I started talking, literally started talking to nature. And I'm like, hey, some dolphins would be great right now to help guide me in. Literally, I'd appreciate that. And sure enough, about a mile offshore, 1.5 miles-ish, a pod of dolphins came out of nowhere. And literally were right there. And I started talking to them and I'm like, thank you for showing up for me. And so when we ask for what we need, when we ask for what it is that our hearts and desire for, right, what we are needing at that time, you'd be shocked at what you can receive.
I mean, yes, and I mean, I love the story, Sarah. Thanks a lot, because actually, what has been in my mind, and I don't know why I didn't share it, but either way, what was in my mind was like, yeah, but if I would go out 4 miles out of shore, I'd be thinking about, oh shit, can I get back, or should I be cautious about something? So I wouldn't really be present, you know?
Right. Everybody asks about the sharks. I'm like, listen, it's not my territory, it's theirs. I don't worry about the sharks. I just don't worry about the sharks. Like, whatever, you know?
And another thing with regard to what because you bring it up now, I want to bring it up too. I love this in your book, where you at some point just asked the universe to bring you like a like a publishing agent.
Yeah.
By December 31st of 2018.
You caught that.
Before that, yes. And on that day, somebody reached out and it happened. I mean,
yep. That's when Claudia reached out, December 31st, that morning. Yeah. And
I think probably this is another thing that I'm just thinking out loud. We are too careful to ask what we need and want.
Can we say that again, please?
We are too careful to ask for what we need and want. I think not only towards other people, but also towards ourselves. And maybe like you give these examples, we clearly are too afraid to ask the universe.
We really are. Literally, like, oh my gosh, can you imagine if we got all of our heart's desires? How scary is that?
Well, that's
being very facetious here.
That's probably why in some cases we don't ask for it, because we're just intimidated by the thought of actually getting it.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you know, and so this, I am not the same person that I was 8 years ago, by the way, at all. And, you know, when all of this happened 8 years ago, I look back at me back then and I'm like, whoa, this has been the craziest transformation. And I feel like right now in my life that it's just kicking in, you know, and what I always tell people though, is I hope, like my hope for everybody else is that they look at this journey that I've been on and realize that it is there and accessible for themselves too.
Yes.
It literally, truly is. I am no different than anyone else. I have people fight me on that. They're like, no, you are. I'm like, no, I'm not. I literally am no different than anybody else. The difference is that, yes, I've lived through a lot, both at a young age and an age right now, right? Where I'm now 48. And take that, please. Take it and use it as your own damn guidebook. Like please, because I didn't go through this for nothing. And so that's why I speak out so much about it, because I want my journey in my life and what I've actually walked through myself to be there for others to learn from. That's it. That's it. It's in service. That's it. Take it, learn from it, and go do your own greatest thing. Yeah. Manifest your life.
Yeah. And don't be held back by fear, which is what we do so often. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And you know what? Scott Simon has a book coming out in December. He had him on my podcast and we were just talking about this, and his book is called Scare Your Soul. And it's this movement that he's been stepping into about doing something that scares you every day. And I always talk about, you know, sometimes we sit in the it's good enough space, especially in healing, like, okay, well, my life is good enough.
Yeah, we spend too much time there.
Right. We spend way too much time in the good enough. Yes. It's the good enough. And so, you know, how about if it could be great? How about if it could be magnificent? How about if it could be magical and beautiful and all of the other things past the quote good enough? Yeah. And a lot of times we get to the good enough and it's kind of like climbing the mountain halfway and we're like, well, the view is really beautiful from here. Yeah. Okay, well, you know, what if you experienced it from the summit? What if you got to the top and you were like, wow, I'm not only seeing, you know, a 180, I'm seeing a 360. And this is amazing up here. And so don't stop where you're at. Like there are no freaking limits. Yeah. And do things, sometimes we got to do things that scare the living daylights out of ourselves to get there. And that's okay too.
Yes, I think those places where we are afraid and where we are like, oh shit, that's the places where we learn and grow. So I also actively seek out those kind of experience.
I do.
Yeah,
I do them every year.
definitely.
Every year I do something that scares the living. This year we're going on the Sierra High Route in the Sierra Mountains, which is not a trail. We're literally waypointing ourselves through the mountains. I'm just like, do I know what I'm doing? Have I done it before? No. And that's okay. If I can make it in from fog into I'm pretty sure like I can learn how to use my phone and my compass, right? And so I'm excited about it. I'm taking it like it's a little scary. And at the same time, there's so much excitement in trying something that I've never tried before.
Yes.
And the more that we do that, the more that we realize that we can overcome other things in our life too.
Exactly. And our abilities, our confidence, our self-belief, it all grows. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nature deficit disorder. It's the idea that human beings, and especially children, are spending too much time, or actually too less time outdoors and too much time indoors. And it can actually cause a range of behavioral disorders. What are your thoughts on this, and also in the current times? I mean, even thinking about this whole past 2 years of COVID, we all spent times with our screens and we are not really connecting in person. We're staying indoors. We're all afraid. What are your thoughts on the natural deficit disorder?
It's a real thing.
Yeah.
It's a real thing.
Yeah.
You know, we were actually, as humans, if you think about it, like if you really feel into it, we were not, like, everything that we have in terms of our phones, our computers, even our walls, all of it, they're all man-made.
Yeah.
Well, we were intended if you really go back, we were intended to grow our own food, to put our hands into the soil, right? Yeah. To walk to wherever it is that we needed to walk to, because we didn't have cars. And so we have actually adapted as humans into a space of what has become unhealthy. And so, because we are constantly relying on other things, also this goes into the whole, like the worthiness thing, this goes into all of that, right? Because we've become attached to things instead of experiences.
Yes.
And you don't need a thing to have an experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we go into our phones and into our computers and watch movies and films and TikTok videos and all those things. Like, we watch everything else to make ourselves feel better. And in reality, if we would actually shut that stuff down and go outside, we could have the experience that's going to make us feel really good.
Yes. I have two things that I think are very important that come up for me with you sharing this. First is, I think why we do this a lot is because I imagine that also being in nature brings us into the present, and sometimes we're just afraid of being with ourselves. That's why that's why we distract ourselves so much.
Yep.
And you've written in your book, for instance, I've learned through my own trauma recovery that we must go deep within ourselves and sit with who we are in order to climb out of the pain and transform. And I really like this, and I can relate very much, because once we can actually face ourselves and be with whatever it is, whatever is there, wherever we are at, then we can face anything. And I think, this is extremely powerful. But again, so many people are distracting themselves on their phone, or with bad habits, or with consumption, or kind of other escapes. What tips would you have for those people who are not even aware of this whole concept of nature deficit disorder? What could they do, or what could people do in general to just reconnect, or either connect or reconnect with nature? What is the low-hanging fruit that you could recommend to people who are caught up in their phones all the time, for instance?
Well, first of all, leave your phone at home. Literally leave your phone at home, which for some people, if you're having a problem leaving your phone at home, that speaks volumes right there. Then it's going into asking yourself why, like, what about that am I having a problem with? What about that is that alone giving me anxiety to leave my phone at home? Right. And then literally going outside and just sitting down, just sit down outside. It doesn't have to be, like I said, it doesn't have to be in the mountains. It doesn't have to be on the ocean. Go to the park, go out into your backyard. Or if you can't even do that, if that's something that because for a long time, remember, we weren't even supposed to go outside, open the window. And so, and allow yourself to feel the air. The most important thing that we can do is open up our senses. And so going outside and allowing ourselves to sit, right? And to breathe, go back to the breath, because the breath always brings us back to the present.
Yeah.
And just literally close your eyes, feel the breeze, feel the sun on our skin, allow ourselves to, if you want to open your eyes, look at the clouds, look at the trees, hug a tree, touch a tree, feel the blades of grass underneath our body, right? Or the earth that's actually holding us. And just taste the air, because everything tastes like we can even taste that, right? Especially if you're in like a forest and you taste that wonderful mildewy, taste. It's so good. It's so good, right? And just opening up your senses, that alone is so healing. Give yourself 5 minutes of that, just 5 minutes of the calm. And the more that you experience it, the more you're going to want it. And the more that you're going to want it, the more that you're going to experience it. And it's this like beautiful little loop.
Yeah, I like that. And it's true. We don't have to do the grand things, even indeed, as you say, opening the window or taking some time to actually look at the sky unfold and move. It's a very valuable thing to do. I want to be respectful of your time, Sara. I have 2 more questions.
Go for it.
From your own experience of healing yourself in this process, what is the essence, if you had to name 1 or 2 things that you have learned from this process and from your time in nature, and also what you share in your retreats, perhaps the book? What is the essence of this process? What is the thing that we really need to focus on, at least?
So, okay, I'm going to give you the quick version answer here. I was offshore on the Pacific Ocean, once again, on my paddleboard, having a conversation with literally the universe, God, angels, whatever you want to call them, not my higher self, like not my higher self, but a higher self, higher being. And I literally asked that question. This is why I'm laughing about this. I literally said, like, what are the 3 things? What are the 3 words? Things come in 3s to me. And so I was like, what are the 3 words that you would give me that are my guiding space through this process? And the first was truth. And I talk about this in my book. The first is truth. Always speak your truth. Know your truth. Believe your truth. Get into your truth. Get into the home of who you are, right? Now, understand that your truth could be very different than somebody else's truth. That also would be like passing judgment or projecting onto you about truth. Your truth is your experience, your journey in this lifetime, period, nuts and bolts. That's it, right? And so know it, stand in it, and understand it. Like, really get to the essence of it. What is your truth of who you are, of the experiences that you've walked through, of the experiences that you're in right now, and embrace that. Like, truly embrace that, be with it. The second word that came to me when I was out there was inspiration. Finding moments of inspiration every day will get us out of our head. That's where we experience the awe and the wonder and the joy.
Yes.
Right. And so find moments of inspiration creatively, like even creatively looking at your life and how do I want to live it? And then hope. And hope was the one that I always laugh about, because I remember getting that word like downloaded to me and I'm like, what the hell, hope? Like, I got no hope. I'm in like, this sucks, man. Like, I got no hope, right? Like literally that's what I was saying to, like, what the hell? Where's this coming from? And then through my journey, what I realized is that hope is an internal space. Hope is an internal flame that needs to be fed every day. It's not external. So when people say, you can have my hope, I'm like, no, you got to find your own hope, because your hope's in you. Your hope's always been in you. You were born with your hope. And so what we need to do is actually to turn up the flame of your internal hope, because that's your jam space. That's like your I don't know what we would want to call it, like the spice, right, of it all. And so, exactly. Right. And so, those are the 3 words. That's what I give you.
If you have hope, even a grain of hope, then there's still like, you will get into action. You'll put another step, after the other one. And like, if we have hope, we can still see possibility. I think hope is the fuel of anything, actually.
It really is.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think for so many people, they mistake it. They think that it's an external space. Like, we have to grab hope from somebody else, or from hope from like, okay, well, hope, that it's going to be given to you from society. Right. And it's actually not at all the way it works. It's an internal space.
Yeah. Beautiful. those three: truth, inspiration, and hope.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, Sarah, I could be talking to you for hours, maybe another day. Last question, and I like to answer. I like to end with this question. I always end with this question. What question about healing in nature didn't I ask, which I definitely should have asked?
Okay, forgiveness.
Yeah.
Where does forgiveness come into nature? Forgiveness comes into nature because there's three parts to forgiveness that I realized through my own journey, which always starts with self. So self-forgiveness is super important.
Yeah.
That goes into the space of understanding, like really taking note of what you did wrong, or to others or to yourself, what caused it, right? Choosing to, what would I do differently next time? Like what can I choose to do differently next time in this space? And then going into self-forgiveness space, because we become so hard on ourselves, right? Like we are so hard on ourselves as well. Like, why didn't I do that right? There's a constant space, I think, in humans where we don't give ourselves enough grace and fierce self-compassion. And we need to get back to doing that. We are human beings. We are not meant to be perfect. Yeah. We are also meant to learn from our wrongs. And so that's really, really important.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I can very much relate to it. And I want to add to that. I talked to Michelle Johnston, and I talked to her about connection. And what I really liked, we talked about connection, or actually perfection equals disconnection.
Oh, yeah.
If we are perfect, I mean, I know this from my own experience where I wanted to be perfect for everyone. And actually it resulted in me disconnecting with other people because I was too perfect and I wasn't showing my flaws or my incompleteness and my mistakes. And actually when we allow that to be seen, people can relate to us. And yeah, I think it's beautiful.
I'm so not a perfect human being. I'm so not a perfect human being. No. And I love that, because I think that in our imperfections, that's where we get to learn so deeply about ourselves, and to do better, right? And to be a better human too. Yeah. You can't grow without imperfection. You literally cannot grow without imperfection. Yeah.
But you're definitely right on the forgiveness part. We can do much more of that. Yeah. We
need so much more of that. And forgiving others is really important. Obviously, that said, I never tell people that it's a necessity. It's in your own journey and your own time and what feels right for you. Mm-hmm. What I would always suggest, though, is go back to forgiving yourself first. Don't hand your power to somebody before you actually empower yourself. Yeah. So stand in your self-forgiveness. Then if you choose to forgive others, awesome. You're doing it for you. Let's just talk about that too. Like forgiveness, when you're forgiving somebody, you're doing it for yourself, yes. Which is not a selfish thing. It's a selfless thing, because you're releasing pain and allowing yourself to be more in that space of freedom and peace, right? For everyone. And then it's forgiveness for the world. Like the world wrongs us. Let's just state it what it is, right? Mm-hmm. Society wrongs us. And sometimes there's a lot that happens in this world that shouldn't be happening. I mean, there is right now. And so, all over the world. And so having forgiveness and being able to see people as humans and society as a space of its own, and this earth as its own growth space, when we can actually do that, when we can actually look at the forgiveness piece from that space too, it really allows us to understand a little bit more deeply.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. I really enjoyed and appreciate
Thank you.
the talk. And I'll be staying in touch and following what you're doing. And
please do.
I might join you on one of these retreats.
Hurry up. Well, so the Grand Canyon's actually like closing for a while, right? So so it's really crazy. I mean, my business is shifting into corporate work now. So I'm doing more corporate retreats and speaking as well, and corporate workshops and different things. But the Grand Canyon, they're redoing the water pipeline starting in May of 2023. And so we have retreats coming up in July, which is co-ed, November over Thanksgiving, which is co-ed. And then we have 2 in January. One is an all women and one is a co-ed. And that's it for a while until we see what happens, because they're closing all the services at the bottom. And so there will be other things that I'm doing, obviously, but it's,
I've been there in 2005, a long time ago, but it was amazing. It's a very impressive place.
Amazing. It's such a it's so amazing.
Yeah.
It is such a beautiful space.
Yeah, and we were young and stupid, and we just climbed down, just on a random spot, started to climb down further and further down to some beautiful spot. And naively as we were, we brought a couple of beers. I was still drinking at the time. We brought a couple of beers and we drank the beers. And then we realized, oh, fuck, we still have to get back up.
You got to get up.
It was a scary experience. But I mean,
especially after drinking.
Sorry?
Especially after drinking?
Yeah, it was. I mean, we didn't have a lot, but definitely noticed it climbing back up. It was a little bit.
Well, I'd love to guide you. It would be really fun. I love the work that we do down there. It's just amazing. It's so cool. So enlightening.
Hey, thanks a lot, Sarah. Have a beautiful day, and we'll
thank you. I appreciate you.
Yes,
thank
likewise.
you.
Bye. Bye-bye.